Today on TimesCast, 13 are killed as Christians and Muslims clash in Cairo suburbs.
I think the wild card is that nobody knows what the post-Mubarak government will look like.
Suspected Tucson killer Jared Loughner appeared in court Wednesday.
Today's the very first court hearing to be held in Tucson.
And a new controversy at NPR leads to the chief executive's resignation.
For the last 3 days, there have been protests in downtown Cairo about the burning of a church in a village to the south called Soul. Late last night, that turned violent when a group of Muslims from the neighborhood began to attack the protesters. The army eventually had to come in and disperse the protesters by firing into the air. The Muslim and Christian communities in Egypt have a very long history of tension, and flare-ups and eruptions like this are not uncommon here. Now, one thing that the Christians are upset about is that there have been a number of very dramatic acts of violence against the Christian community over the past year or so. Last January, there was a shooting in southern Egypt. A number of Christians were killed as they left Christmas Mass. On January 1st, there was a bombing in a large church in Alexandria, which many believe to be a suicide bombing. The perpetrator of that attack and the network that may have organized it is still not known. The wild card here is that Egypt is in a place of real kind of political instability. This fighting that we've seen the past couple of days is the first time that there's been sectarian fighting since the resignation of President Mubarak on February 11th. And it really poses a challenge to the military, which has not had to face these issues before. Against that backdrop, the sense of anger and real grievance that many Christians feel towards both the former regime and the Muslim majority has potential to really lead to further instability and possibly violence in the future.
Jared Loughner, the suspected Tucson killer, appeared in court Wednesday.
I'm in Tucson, Arizona, outside the federal courthouse here. We're here to cover the arraignment of Jared Loughner in the Tucson shooting spree from January 8th, and he is being arraigned on 49 counts. I have the indictment here. It's a thick document. We're expecting an emotional day in the courtroom. We're expecting relatives of some of the people who died, some people who were injured. Today's the very first court hearing to be held in Tucson. We're only about 5 miles from the scene of the shooting. All the other proceedings were held several hours north in Phoenix. Jared Loughner is already in Tucson. We've learned from court papers. He's expected to appear in court today. This trial, we don't know when it's going to get started officially. The judge in the case, Larry Burns, has said he'd like it to start in September of this year. The prosecution agrees with that, but the defense is saying it needs over a year to get ready. So we're expecting the judge today to spend a lot of his time ruling on the barrage of legal motions that the prosecution and defense have been filing back and forth behind the scenes. That's where we're expecting the bulk of today's action to be.
The Republican Party is not really the Republican Party. It's been hijacked by this group that is
radical, racist, Islamophobic, Tea Party people.
And not just Islamophobic, but really xenophobic. I mean, basically, they believe in sort of white, middle America, gun-toting. I mean, it's pretty scary.
Brian, yesterday, the news broke that a senior executive at NPR had made derogatory comments about the Tea Party in a surreptitiously made video. And then today, Vivian Schiller, the chief executive of NPR, resigned. Boy, that was quick.
It was very quick. It all happened in the span of 12 hours between this video coming online from the Republican filmmaker James O'Keefe and then...
He was the guy who did the Acorn videos.
Acorn videos, a number of videos really that are set up to embarrass groups that he views as being politically in opposition to him. In this instance, they essentially set a trap for this NPR executive pretending to be
He's in charge of getting funding.
Right, and they basically created these guys posing as Muslims from a charity that wanted to give $5 million to NPR, brought them to a fancy lunch in Washington, recorded the whole thing, and sort of baited them with a series of comments and questions about the Jewish-run media outlets, questions about NPR's views.
In my personal opinion, liberals today might be more educated, fair, and balanced than...
I like it when you take your NPR hat off.
Well, part of the reason the pressure is building is there was the Juan Williams affair a couple of months ago that resulted in the resignation of Ellen Weiss, the news director. What happened there?
The timing couldn't have been worse for NPR. They're heading into a volatile political season where Republicans, who have always wanted to cut NPR's funding, were taking over Congress. And there they go, firing Juan Williams, a guy who also worked for Fox News, a guy who would say a lot more on Fox News, go a little farther with his politics than he would on NPR. Essentially, ever since then, NPR has been under scrutiny from Republicans, and this video by James O'Keefe only heightened that scrutiny.
You got to wonder if it's all going to work. You're being pursued by people who are against public funding of media no matter what.
Right.
And you keep rolling bodies out the back of the truck, hoping to slow them down. There's been very little sign that the strategy is going to work.
Prior to her position at NPR, Vivian Schiller was a senior vice president at the New York Times. Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.